Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Players Championship. TPC Sawgrass, one of the more iconic venues that we have on the whole schedule. Of course, another Florida track with plenty of water volatility. In fact, water in all 18 holes out there. And on top of that, a star-studded field in unofficially the 5th major championship of the season. So here in this video, going to break down all things TPC Sawgrass and make sure you know everything you need to about the stadium course to go out there and get your research started. We'll go through some of the course details, a few trends over the last few years, so a statistical breakdown of some of the performance around TPC Sawgrass, hole by hole breakdown, and towards the end of the video, some of the key stats and comp courses around the PGA Tour that I'm using to identify my top plays. Key metrics in my modeling that are going to give me a good idea of the types of players to look at both for DFS and for betting. So a lot to talk through here, a lot to go through with TPC Sawgrass. Let's not waste any time at all. Go ahead and hop right on in. TPC Sawgrass is a peat dye design, and just like all the peat dye designs, there's a lot of strategy involved in playing this kind of golf course. And though it doesn't have nearly as long a rough as what you had at the API, normally conditions aren't nearly as windy over there in Ponte Vedra Beach. However, there's still all of the different aspects to TPC Sawgrass that add that difficulty, including a lot of horrible angles off the tees. The around the green shots at this golf course are a lot more difficult than what you had at the API. So just like PGA National, another difficult track this time of year, all three have that water volatility, but they're all difficult in their own different way. And with a peat dye design, a lot of your solid ball strikers tend to play well. A lot of your driving accuracy players tend to get a big bump at peat dye designs as well. The main reason for that is because there's a huge emphasis on having that accuracy. When you miss at a peat dye design, the course is set up to penalize you, unlike you see at some of the easier tracks on the PGA Tour. So the rough will be about 3.5 inches this week. I'll be there on property all week, including the practice round on Wednesday. So I'll give you guys a good idea of how long that is around then. But it's normally pretty juicy out there. If it gets wet with some overnight rain, can play even more penal than what you see when it's a little bit drier out. When you're missing into the greens, your around the green shots are exceptionally difficult at any peat dye design. Because this is, again, the unofficial 5th major championship, they put some nasty pin locations out there. They get these things running 12.5, 13 on the stimp meter. And if you add in a little bit of that Florida breeze, well, then you're asking for a whole lot of hurt out there. So you get a lot of variance here. A lot of your top end players like a Cantlay and Xander routinely miss the cut at this kind of event. And it's a full field event. You have a lot of golfers teeing it up. I believe 144 for this week. Might even be 156. I'll have to double check after we get off of here. But there's going to be your usual cut line. And oftentimes your betting favorites, guys up there in that 9-10K range for DFS, don't make it to the weekend. So kind of like what we had at PGA National or even last week at the API, be prepared for some blowups. Some guys to miss the cut like a, Morikawa or what was it, a Fitzpatrick that ended up missing the cut last week. There are going to be some top end guys that aren't making it to Saturday and Sunday. They've got some small green complexes as well. So along with the fact that off the tee, there's quite a bit of water in play, that long rough, the greens aren't very large targets, right? 5,500 square foot is about 2,000 less per green compared to what you had at the API, which again is just another one of the different challenges, different type of a challenge that you get around a TPC Sawgrass. In terms of the statistical breakdown over here, you'll see that the fairway and green percentages actually aren't all that far off from where we have it for the PGA Tour. In fact, fairway percentage is only 0.1% off, literally dead in line with the Tour average. Your green average is slightly lower compared to what we usually see, only about 2% lower though. So even with the small targets, right, field strength probably has a lot to do with it, right? They still hit a good amount of fairways and greens. Your scrambling rate is lower than what you're used to seeing, so that's where that around the green difficulty is coming into play. There's more 3 putts at this golf course compared to your PGA Tour average. Again, that green difficulty, the speed of the greens coming into play there. But what's not shown on this are all the blowups because of the water holes. What's not shown on this is people going out there and making a 7 or an 8 over there on hole 17. A lot of the pressure that comes into play, a lot of the really hard holes that have water in play are towards the end of your round, right? Holes, I think it's 15 through 18 have water in play substantially on every single hole, and obviously 16 through 18 the most notable, most iconic of that stretch. But all 18 holes around a TPC Sawgrass have water in play. And I think there's one or two holes where it's not really a problem for most players, where it's quote unquote in play because it's like 40, 50 yards to the side. But I've literally never seen this before. A golf course where it's had it, quote unquote, water in play on all 18 holes. Also worth noting that we have some Poa trivialis overseeded greens, so just wanted to circle back on that. There is a Bermuda grass base layer down here in Florida, but this time of year, kind of like the API, everything is going to be overseeded. So you got to look at some of your Poa overseed stats when it comes to your putting stuff. Around the green and fairways, it's not really that true grainy Bermuda grass either. So it's a little bit of a tough week when it comes to trying to find around the green comps. Even your putting stats, we don't have a ton of courses that have this Poa overseed, but we get it at the stadium course over there at PGA West. A few other courses like the Valspar play on the same surface. There's a few that you can at least pull from to take a look at some of the players on this particular type of grass. So that's it for the greens. Other thing to note out here for the Players Championship is it's listed at like 7,300 yards, but a lot of times it plays shorter. They move up quite a few tee boxes for this event. So look forward to a lot of that out there at TPC Sawgrass. A few other things to note from your past performers. So going over here to last year's leaderboard, your winner was 17 under par, Scotty Scheffler, who of course boat raced the field at API. I got to see that Sunday performance in person. It was absolutely magical. Just no other way to describe it. He executed every shot to perfection for the most part. When he wasn't being aggressive, he hit the shot to the center of the green like intended. And then on the easier holes, when he had a wedge in hand in particular, he went after pins and usually hit it within 6-7 feet and made all of those putts. So Scotty won here last year, obviously won last week. He's the rightful betting favorite at this event. But what's, it's kind of worth noting over here, I want to bring up the course history. We'll also bring up some of the recent form. And what this is over here, and Bet the Number, by the way, Bet the Number, of course, not only important for doing course research, is you can go back and use the stats from last year to see players' lead-in form. So the stats that we have over here to the left are the lead-in form for all of these players. This form over here to the right is not their form right now. This is the form heading into the event last year. And then this is also the course history before last year's event. So what this is really useful for is seeing how guys were looking, right, and how they shaped out on the actual leaderboard. And what you'll see up here is a lot of guys that were gaining on approach, a lot of guys in general that were gaining with their tee to green play. And Minwoo Lee, it looks like he was a negative right over there in most stat categories. That's because he was playing on the DP World Tour, right? And his lead-in form at that point was literally non-existent. It was only major championships, which he hadn't really fared well at in the past. So Minwoo Lee over there, right? You can kind of throw that data point out. Look at all the rest of the green that we have here, right? I know Hideki, right, wasn't real green with either of the ball striking categories, but really good when it came to the shots gained around the green. So that's where the tee to green aspect comes in. Cam Davis, he actually had missed 3 cuts coming in. So he was another outlier, I would say, compared to the top 10 finishers. But the rest of this top 10 up here, especially like your top 5, were guys that were striping it. They were popular plays, right? Terrell Hatton was absolutely killing it out there at this event. And events coming into this. Scotty Scheffler, of course. I mean, look at this. T4, T12, first place finish. A lot of your winners, a lot of your top 5, top 10 finishers here, actually, I think it's the last 4 or 5 winners at this event, have been top 5 shots gained players heading into this event, have been guys that were gaining routinely over a stroke and a half per round. And you're not really going to be able to find your game out here at the TPC Sawgrass. It's the unofficial 5th major. All that water, all that pressure usually leads to a top level champion. And if we just go back and look at the year before this, so 2022 was a little bit more putting heavy than what we had in 2023. It was a little bit softer out there in 2022. I would say that's when Cam Smith ended up winning this event. But let's look at a few of the players' lead-in form there, right? And see, how they were striping it before then. Cam Smith was gaining on approach, right? His tee to green play was excellent heading into that event. Arban Lahiri, an outlier, right? Nobody saw that coming, and he got shipped off to live shortly after that. Paul Casey, same thing speaking of, but he was playing really well on approach. Kevin Kisner, he did it with the putter, right? He's a past champion at this event, so that shows you that course history can matter, right, at the Players' Championship. Got guys like Keegan Bradley over there with a T6 finish. He actually wasn't playing all that well, so that one's a little bit of an outlier outlier too, but Russell Knox, right? A 6K guy that popped off was gaining a bunch on approach. Harold Varner III was at least doing his thing around the green, but Victor Hovland, striper on approach play. This year was a little bit more putting heavy, so you can see, right, more of your putting poppers were showing up. But we go back to 2021, we go back to 2020, I'll just do this real quickly here. We won't spend too much time. You'll see that a lot of the guys heading in were again, tee to green play, just absolute stripers. So here's the 2021 data. So you can see up here, a lot of approach play showing up. This is the year that Justin Thomas ended up winning the event. Corey Connors was dark green across both categories. There's almost no red. Right up here in that top, I mean, look at that. That's uncanny, right? Tee to green play, everyone was at least about average in all three categories. Victor Perez, a little bit of an outlier, but once again, right, DP World Tour player, he had no form to speak of, right? It was only major championships in terms of shots gained metrics for Victor Perez, but all that dark green there. And then again, just to glance at 2020, I'm going to do this super quickly here. You'll see that the tee to green play, I guess, except for 2022, that is an outlier to at least point out, all matched up. And I guess, yeah, 2020, they didn't even play because that was the COVID situation. Let's go back to 2019 and bring it up. There's the Players' Championship. And you'll see a lot of those ball striking tee to green players showing up once again out here this year. So this is the year Hideki, actually, no, Hideki didn't win. It was the year before that. Come on. That's the year Rory McIlroy won. I mean, look at all this dark green up here from tee to green. Look at all these around the green players that showed up that year. I mean, Jim Furyk finishing in second. You had a few guys losing off the tee, which you'll see. Eddie Pepperell, again, a DP World Tour player that had no form to speak of. Brandt Snedeker, right, he does it with the short game. But for the vast majority of these players, it's all that dark green up there. A lot of good form coming into. I mean, Rory McIlroy was playing some of the best golf of his life. I mean, it just looks like it's a Scotty Scheffler week, right? If it's going to be tee to green play, if it's going to be form, if it's going to be course history, well, Scotty Scheffler has literally all three of those things. So it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be whether to play him or not. He's super expensive for DFS. He's got one of the worst outright betting numbers in terms of value that we've seen for quite some time. It's going to get messy because pretty much all signs are, pointing to him having a massive week out there. But this is a golf course where we know what to expect. It hasn't changed much over the last 4 or 5 years. It's a tough test. You got to avoid the water. You got to keep the ball in play. And when you miss greens, you have to be absolutely magical to get up and down. Here's the stadium course in all of its glory. So hole number 1 is a little bit of a handshake, but you'll see a few guys pull a shot into the woods. It's oftentimes a layup for players out here. At most a 3-wood, probably a driving iron for most players. And if you do duck hook it into the woods, you might make a triple or a double like you saw with Paul Casey a few years ago. That didn't stop him from finishing in the top 5 though. So I was a tilter of that in person, somebody that I backed for an outright that week, and was in hell of a sweat when it came to Sunday. But it should be a handshake for most players. It's a small green. If you miss this green, it's going to be a difficult up and down, especially to a short-sided pin. And it's just a good taste of what you get with TPC Sawgrass. There's no real easy holes to be had out here, but there are a whole lot of difficult ones. Hole number 2 is 535. It is your first quote-unquote scoring look out here at TPC Sawgrass. It is not as scoreable as you'd expect for a 535-yard par 5. Fairway is relatively wide. Your shot into the green is where it gets difficult. It is a tiny green complex, and it plays a whole lot smaller because of the runoff areas. And something to note about this course is that we do have 5,500 square foot greens, which are on the smaller side of the PGA Tour, but they really play like 3,000 square foot greens. Everything around the green is shaved off. You will have a little bit of rough from time to time, but usually a lot of the greens are surrounded with fairway grass, and the reason for that is to promote misses to miss further offline, right? Like I said before, your misses at a Pete Dye golf course are punished. That's why a lot of players rue these kind of golf courses. A lot of people don't like them because when you miss, there's no real way to get out of it, right? You're going to be penalized. A lot of times you're making bogeys when you're hitting the ball offline, whether it's the water, which is in play on this hole. You can see you have this lake over here to the right, which will gobble up a few shots. Just bunker over here to the right, which will cause problems. These little pot bunkers, you can see these are Pete Dye specials, as players will call them. It's a real difficult shot to get home into and to hold this kind of green complex. Hole 3 is 183 yards. This is a quote-unquote easy hole at TPC Sawgrass. This is into the wind most times. It's a relatively large green compared to others at this golf course. But once again, you have this little fairway area to the right that has that runoff. There's a huge runoff towards the front side of this green where up and downs are extremely difficult because of the elevation up to the green complex. It's not a very long par 3, right? 183 yards is manageable, but you're not going to see a whole lot of birdies at hole 3. Hole 4 is 392. You've got water down the right, which shouldn't be in play for most players. This bunker to the right is going to get a lot of action because this rough to the left is the most juicy on the entire golf course. It's also an extremely sloped lie. What you can't really get appreciation for from some of the overhead views here are the slopes, the undulation that you have at TPC Sawgrass. There was a lot of man-made mounding that they added out here, and over here to the left side is a huge slope up here from the cart path down to the fairway. So if you hit it over there, a lot of players will have to lay up heading for this green because the juicy lie makes it hard to even carry this water. And if you hit it over the green, you've got some real difficult up and down shots as well where the water over the green could come into play. Something about TPC Sawgrass, which is a lot more difficult than what we had at the API. It's also why there's going to be a lot more water balls at this golf course than what we had for last week, is all of the areas next to the hazards. I mean, you'll see this. It's not so much down here. You do have a little bit of rough protecting players down here, but up here towards the greens, everything is mowed down, right? Now, when we get to 17, you'll see that there's a little strip of rough that is protecting the players, but it's only a little strip, right? Any sort of ball that has speed heading towards that barrier is going to end up in this water hazard. So it's a golf course where they're not going to protect you from a lot of those water balls, as opposed to last week at the API where that long 4-5 inch rough kept a lot of balls out of going into the water. Hole number 5 is 468. This is a longer par 4. Once again, you got this water down the right side and a hill to the left. So just like last hole, if you miss to the left side, you've got a juicy lie with a downhill aspect to it. To a green that is large over here at hole 5, but has some real difficult around the green shots. Hole 6 is 390 of water down the left. The trees to the right are absolute dead if you try to get it to the green. Another thing you can't really get appreciation for here are all the palm trees that protect the right side of this green here. If you're in the trees, you have pretty much no shot because you're not going to carry these palm trees to the right, which are absolutely ginormous. In fact, if you're heading in from the fairway, you have to cut around them. They're that big. Hole 7 is 450. This one, it has water down the left side. Got a little ahead of myself there, but it's a longer par 4 and a green complex, which is about average in size, but a ton of slope on it. One of the harder greens on the entire golf course. So with the mid-length aspect, the water on it, of course, it actually gobbles up quite a few players, especially if it happens to play into the wind. Hole 8 is 237. Once again, if it's into the wind, just buckle on here. A lot of times they'll move up the tee box to accommodate the harder pin locations, but it's a long par 3. It is a large green complex, but really hard to hit that surface off the tee. And finally, you finish with a par 5 on the front 9. This one's a little bit uphill with your second shot. It's also blind because this tree to the left, congregation of trees over here to the left side blocks your view of the green. You can't take a direct line at it if you're trying to reach this green in 2, and instead you have to hit a big hook around it. So that Rory McIlroy ball flight, that Ludwig Aberg that can probably just take it over that kind of stuff, has a huge advantage at hole number 9. Hole 10 is 422. So if you're starting on the backside, it's as much of a handshake as you're going to get out here at TPC Sawgrass. It's one of the few holes where you hit something like a 3-wood or driving iron off the tee, and relatively short, but difficult if you miss the green complex. And you'd be surprised how many people, even with an iron, duck hook it into the woods or over crank it over here to the right side. It gets players every single year. Hole 11 is 570. This is a par 5 where water's even more in play than what we had with a few on the front 9. You have water down the whole right side and a green complex that is small and also has a ton of undulation to it. Just getting around the green in 2 is far from a guarantee of going out there and getting a birdie. Hole 12 is 370. Last year, they moved up this tee box up here to this front one to accommodate this as a drivable par 4, and you saw them absolutely tear it up. So this depends on the tee box location more than anything. If it's played to its true hole, it's still a birdie hole, right? Because it's a little pitch and putt par 4, but this is as easy as it gets out here at TPC Sawgrass. Hole 13 is 185 yards. You've got water to carry on the left side, more of a problem for any left side pin location, but this is a real tricky green too. And for some reason, even with the large complex, it's a hard green to hit as well. Hole 14 is maybe your hardest hole in property. It's at least up there in the top 5 every single year. It's a long par 4. You do have a large fairway area, but if you miss it to the right, which for whatever reason, a lot of guys miss it over here to the right, it's juicy rough and it's extremely sloped over here from the cart path downwards. So kind of like a few of the holes on the front 9 where you had that trouble down the left, if you miss right on the back 9, you are absolutely screwed. Large green complex to accommodate the longer hole, but a lot of undulation on it. So it's not a guarantee to get a 2-putt and extremely difficult to get up and down around. Hole 15 is 467. It's another mid-length par 4 into tee shot that doesn't require a driver. A lot of guys will hit a 3-wood off of this tee, and I'd say maybe not the hardest green that you have here, but it is relatively small, especially since you're hitting a mid to a long iron. Hole 16 is iconic. Is this the iconic stretch, right? 16 through 18. It's a par 5 to start with water down the right for your approach shot. We'll talk about the island green over there in just a second, but this is a real difficult hole to go for it into, right? You have to have it in the fairway. You're not going to go for it out of the rough. And even if you're hitting out of the fairway, it's hard to hold this green complex. So you'll see a lot of people bail out to the left, end up in one of the pot bunkers or this fairway area. And to any right side pin location, it's not a gimme up and down, just like the last par 5. 17 is the island green. I'll be here for a lot of the week, just taking in all the carnage. And it's only 145 yards, but you guys know just how difficult this can be. So you got the slope in the middle of the green, which will roll balls back into the water. You do have that slight little, collar where they have that rough there. On the Wednesday Pro-Am, I'm going to see if they shave that down or not, right? There's a chance. There have been a few years at Sawgrass where they have gone out there and let even more balls trickle into the water, into the aquatic penalty area around the golf course, but we'll have to see what they do at 17. And then lastly, we have 18 where you got water down the left, super thick rough to the right, also some trees over here that can block you out, and the water goes the whole way up the fairway, which, if you set up a good angle into the green, a lot of players probably aren't expecting to hit it into the water on their second shot, but Cam Smith, right, when he went out there and won this event, went out there and hit it into the water on his second shot. It's more in play than you think because of the sloping. The entire fairway goes from right to left. Any sort of shot that has draw spin is extremely live to catch that stuff, even if it is on approach. So it's a difficult approach, difficult off the tee shot, a ton of undulation, extremely difficult to get up and down over here at hole 18, and a proper finishing hole for the unofficial 5th major of the year. Now that we're all familiar with the course and the shots required, let's go through some of my key stats for TPC Sawgrass that I'll be using to identify my top plays. So first off, it's all about your ball striking, whether it's off the tee or on approach. I need players that are in form, because outside of that 2022 year where it was a little bit more putting heavy, it's almost always those tee to green guys that are showing up. So if we go out here, just sort this by approach play and off the tee. So this is the BTN model on here. Of course, another aspect of why I love this site is I could take a look at what they're looking at for their custom model and run it by what I'm doing to make sure that I'm on the right track. And just looking at the model on here, right, they're looking at off the tee and approach play over the last 30 rounds in their specific model here. But if we take a look at the stats that they're really emphasizing, right, there's 20% more on approach play, in particular from 125 to 200. Distance from center of fairway, right, they're trying to look at some of that in terms of your off the tee, avoiding water hazards, avoiding that 3.5-inch rough, and green regulation percentage, right, even more so looking at that approach play. So by far, right, their number one key stat is shots gained approach. Number 2, it's shots gained off the tee with a little bit of added emphasis on driving accuracy, which I totally agree with, right? I think that those are by far the top 2 key stats this week. Outside of that, I'm looking at a few other niche stats over there in my custom model, but this is pretty much spawn line with what I'd be looking at. So let's take a look at the top approach players. This is over the last 30 rounds. Number 1 is Tom Hoagie, who of course finished, T3 here last year, so had that top 5, has made the cut here his last 5 years, which is remarkable consistency considering how variant this golf course can be. Tony Finau playing absolutely on fire with the approach play. Scotty Scheffler, Corey Connors, Keith Mitchell, Jake Knapp, all your usual suspects showing up on here. Lucas Glover, Colin Morikawa, right? We'd expect to see that. Austin Eckroat. I like the Arnold Palmer and Cognizant as comp courses, and won and then went T36 in that real strong field last week. So might be a little bit of a sleeper play for this, but Sam Ryder perpetually gaining with the approach play is showing up there again. Shane Lowry, little bit of an intriguing play, right? He finished 8th here in 2021, is in a great stretch of form at those 2 comp courses that we're going to go through later, with a T4 and a 3rd place finish. Adam Scott just continuing some of his good play. Nick Taylor, perpetual striper, finished 12th last week. That's another potential sleeper play. Andrew Novak, of course, out there with 3 straight top 9 finishes, 2 top 8s out there at the Mexico Open and Phoenix Open. Maybe he can continue it at a golf course that seemingly fits his game. I mean, look at this, right? Gaining in all 3 tee to green categories. That's some next level stuff. Willie Z, Peter Malnati, maybe a little bit of a sleeper there. Didn't expect to see that. Usual suspects within EVR and Xander Schauffele always showing up there. Scott Stallings too, Kevin Yu, all really good iron players. But maybe a few surprising names. Let's see. Billy Horschel, right? Ches Reavie, perhaps a little bit surprising. Robert McIntyre. Look at this, right? Tee to green play, flushing it. Not doing so well with the putter. Something worth noting too, right, from last year, Scotty Scheffler won this event as pretty much a neutral putter. I think he was number 47 in the field when it came to shots gained putting and won this event. Robert McIntyre doing all the things from tee to green over the last 30 rounds. I love to see that. Now let's look at some of the off the tee stripers, because you got to be long and accurate here. It's not a long golf course, but driving distance always helps, regardless of the venue that you're playing at. Even if it's a laying up off the tee course, right? Helps on your second shot, right? For a lot of those, and you can normally hit a smaller club, right, off the tee if it is a layup course. So if we're taking a look at shots gained off the tee, I want guys that are known for the accuracy. Rory's been a lot more accurate in 2024 with his change swing. He's coming a little bit more on top of the ball. He's not trying to get as much lift on a lot of his drives. And as a result, he's been a lot more accurate, and he's still hitting the ball an absolute fucking mile, right? So off the tee, his long-term accuracy stuff's not great, right? I mean, his approach play hasn't really been that great of late, but past champion and with that newfound accuracy, I think, everyone's going to take Scotty Scheffler for, outrights DFS, and deservingly so. I don't know if we can completely count out Rory McIlroy. Last week was pretty decent with off the tee, not that great on approach. He's going to have to gain on approach, but he was able to do that at the Cognizant, albeit a weaker field, but did go out there and gain on approach. He's at least a wild card that I'm going to consider. But Keith Mitchell showing up, Scotty Scheffler again, right up there towards the top, and he's been pretty accurate over his last 3 or 4 events. Xander Schauffele, an absolute striper. Kevin Yu. This is a potential sleeper play for the players, I would say. Vince Norman, real long, not very accurate, though, so I kind of worry about that. Benny Ann, I worry about his accuracy, too, a little bit. But, guys like Hovland, right, he can keep it in play. He's played well here, right? 2 top 9 finishes in a row, including a 3rd last year. Guys like Tony Finau, right, if he kind of, tones it down a little bit, maybe he plays well. But he has been trying to, add some distance this year, so I kind of worry about that for Tony Finau. Is playing fantastic golf, though. So again, form matters at this golf course. If you're going to win, if you're going to top 5, form matters. So just based on that alone, that's why he's showing up over here in the BTN model. And just based on that alone, he's probably going to have a good week, right? So just because I don't love the accuracy, I'm probably still playing Tony Finau because of the excellent form coming in. I don't love it, though, right? That's like the one drawback, I'd say, for good old Big Tone. A few other guys, like I worry about Matt McNeely with his accuracy. Same thing with Sahith Theegala, right? I worry about both of their driving accuracy. Doug Gim, I don't. Relatively accurate. Akshay Bhatia, I don't. Relatively accurate off the tee. Minwoo Lee, I definitely worry about his accuracy. Sam Burns, same thing. Wyndham Clark, for sure. He did happen to keep it in play a few years ago, though. Actually, last year, 2023, gained nearly 5 strokes in terms of his shots gained off the tee. So he can control it if he needs to, but didn't do that at the U.S. Open, that's for sure. Corey Connors, Ludwig Gayberg, Connor's real good accuracy guy, Aberg not. So these off the tee numbers, right, just make sure you're adding in that driving accuracy. So they have it as distance from center of fairway, right? That's a way to measure exactly how far offline that you're hitting the ball. If we're looking at just the pure most accurate guys in the field, you've got your Kevin Streelman, Strickers, Martins. These kind of guys are the players you'd be looking at for a sleeper play. But Harris English, that is surprising to me. He has been extremely accurate with the driver of late. That's a potential sleeper play to look at this week at $7,800. Jake Knapp has been really accurate. That is surprising to me too, right? You wouldn't really think of that when you think of Jake Knapp, given his distance and whatnot. But Billy Horschel has been accurate and is playing well in approach. That is at $6,600, looking like a juicy DFS play. Aaron Rye, we know he's an accurate player. Adam Scott, that combined with that approach play could be deadly for Adam Scott, which is not something we typically say, right? He's not really an elite level accuracy guy, but in terms of distance from center of fairway, is playing extremely well. Let's see, Robert McIntyre. Wow. Robbie Mack is going to be a play this week. That is for damn sure. Thomas Dietrich showing up, which is kind of surprising too, given that he's not the most accurate player, but at least in terms of this metric, which is very specific, is playing pretty well. And well, let me see the sample on this. I'm assuming it's like 30 rounds. Let's see. It's do they have the rounds up here? It's the last 24 rounds for distance of center of fairway, which that's a good sample size. So yeah. I like that. I like the Dietrich's form. I like the fact that he's not missing the fairways by very much. Robert McIntyre, same thing. That's not something I kind of know him for, but he's been hitting the ball very accurate of late off the tee. That's something. Adam Scott, right? Adam Scott has played extremely well at this event in the past, right? Elite level course history. Another guy that I think intrigues me here. And the Harris English one, especially with how well he's playing, right? T21 at Arnold Palmer, that's fantastic, right? T7 at another signature event, like that is, T17 at Waste Management. I know it's not signature event, but these are all top level finishes in real strong fields. And now we're getting him at a course where he's had horrible course history. Look at this, 5 straight missed cuts, but he's hitting fairways. Maybe it's the year that he goes out there and turns it around. But those are some of the key stats I'm looking at. Again, mostly for me, it's approach play is by far my number one key stat. Number 2 would be shots gained off the tee, but some of that emphasis on driving accuracy. You can use distance from the center of fairway as well. And then outside of that, it's course history. I'm trying to take a look at that. Bogey avoidance, I think, matters at this sort of golf course. And then the main thing I want to look at is shots gained floor to swing, right? Courses with this water in play. Being a solid course manager, right? Making sure you're not getting yourself into that water hazard, completely screwing yourself, putting yourself behind the 8 ball. There's an art form to that. So those are some of the key stats that I'm using in my modeling to go out there and identify my top plays. In terms of comps, my number 1 this week is the Valspar Championship. So the track for next week, where we're going to be over there near Tampa, Florida. I may or may not make the trip over there. That is still to be determined at this point. But it's got a real similar agronomy to what we're going to have for the players. The same kind of overseeded greens we're going to get for that golf tournament. The rough, all of that is very similar. And the off the tee test, albeit a little bit different. It's the same kind of rough, about 3.5 inches at the Valspar, but trees a lot closer to the fairways. So not as much water, still water in play, right? It's a Florida golf course. We know that. You're going to get that down here this time of year, but the trees are where you really get penalized off the tee. And the kind of players, that succeed over there at the Valspar are accurate and long players off the tee, right? So you got to have that combination of both. And on top of that, also really good approach players. So it's a lot of ball striking emphasis, like we have at the Players Championship, the same kind of agronomy, and they're in back-to-back weeks. So if we take a look at last year's leaderboard, right, Taylor Moore stole it from Adam Schenk, but a lot of your top-level ball strikers, right, were just after those two at the top, like Tommy Fleetwood, Spieth, Wyndham Clark. Somebody like Justin Thomas was in contention until very late there last year. JT Post in Reno, has stepped up his game immensely, right, over here over the last 12 months. Matt Wallace, Webb Simpson, right, maybe Cody Gribble, a little bit surprising, but the other half of that leaderboard, right, while we have, Taylor Moore winning, right, Adam Schenk second, the Gribbles, the Webbs and whatnot, the other 5-6 guys in the top 10 to 12 up here are all world-class type of players. So it's another course where it rewards that recent form. Guys like Taylor Moore, I don't think we're playing terribly well heading in, so maybe a little bit of an outlier there. But if we go to the year before that, right, Sam Burns won, coming in with really good form, gained a bunch of strokes on approach with the putter. Davis Riley was up there, right, JT showing up once again. Matt Fitzpatrick, right, elite level ball striker. Ryan Harmon. added aspect with like a Harmon and Fitz is that they're pretty accurate off the tee, right? Sam Burns, maybe not so much. That's why I'd say over there at the Valspar, it's a little bit of a different test, right? You don't have water in play in all 18 holes, right? You can miss just a little bit offline and get away with it over there at the Valspar. But if you go to the year before that, right? Sam Burns winning back-to-back, Keegan Bradley, Victor Hovland, right? These are guys that have shown up multiple times and played well at the Players' Championship. Even Karen Chingale, guys like Abraham Answer, right? Accurate players off the tee. They fit, both of these courses to an absolute tee. Max Homa played well there a few years ago before that. Neiman, Oosthuizen, I guess this was like the Live Open over here at the Valspar Championship. But these are all players that we know to be top-level tee to green players. It's why they show up at major championships. Joaquin Neiman, of course, before he left to the Live Tour, was an elite-level ball striker himself, right? Won the Genesis, for goodness sakes. These are the sort of players that you look for at the Valspar, and is why I look at it as a comp course. So a lot of crossover. Your fairway and green average is a little bit lower at this golf course, actually maybe even a little bit tougher than what we have for TPC Sawgrass. Greens aren't nearly as difficult as what we have over there for the players, but the tee to green test is probably even more stern. Next up, we have the Cognizant Classic, which of course was the Honda Classic before this year, but the golf course is difficult. It's a little bit of a different test, I would say. The rough length, similar. The agronomy is a little bit different. You have pure Bermuda grass over there at the Cognizant. This week, it is that overseeded Poa trivialis. So the putting stats probably aren't the best to use as a comp. It's going to throw your analysis off a little bit using that one-to-one crossover. But with all the water in play, right, there's an art form, right, to handling all of that variance. And on top of that, it's a lot of similar approaches, right? A lot of the same kind of buckets that are being accessed as those mid to long irons at both of the golf courses. It'll take a second to load here, but once again, like the averages for the course, whether you look at fairway, look at greens, whenever it loads up on here, you'll see that they're not that much harder than what we have for PGA Tour course, right? Where all the difficulty comes in, where you see, a scoring average or a winning score that doesn't get out of hand is because of all the doubles, the triples that you make, because you're punished when you miss shots. When you go out there, you miss fairways or you miss greens. So it's taken a hot second to load here. Let me see if I can force load it by going over here to another tab. But it's that same kind of course. So if you want to look at that, it might not load on here over on Bet the Number. My internet probably just a little bit slow, but I would look at that, and then I'd look at the API, right? API would be my number 3 comp. It's not my favorite because of the fact that it has that longer rough, it has slightly larger greens, but once again, that Florida aspect, that Florida, westernly, I shouldn't say westerly, the afternoon breeze that you get at this part of the country has an impact on play, and it shapes the mindset, the kind of strategy that you have to play at it, right? When you're avoiding the water, right, there are proper misses out there. Players like Scotty Scheffler excel at that. It's why they excel at major championships, and why he's won at API, he's won over there at the Players, right? He just hasn't played over there at the Cognizant, or I'm sure he's probably at least would have won that once or twice at this point as well. So it's that Florida stretch, all these courses kind of play the same way, and if you're going to look for comp courses, I think they're really good tracks to look at. That's all I've got for the course breakdown. Before you're hopping out of here, go ahead, smash that like button for your boy. And on top of that, go ahead and comment down below what you think the winning score is going to be this week for a chance to go out there and earn a free month of my Patreon. On there, of course, is where you can support the channel and get access to all the behind the scenes content that I'm going out there and producing, whether it's my course breakdowns on there, my key metrics, and the kind of weights that I'm putting on them over there in my custom model, so you can go out there and replicate that yourself. We got all the sheets I post, whether it's DFS projections, on there, my modeling, whether it's long-term form, course fit, all of that kind of stuff, is all posted for my Patreon members. And for access to that, or a chance to earn that, go ahead and give me that winning score prediction. Just for the sake of, my prediction here, we'll go with 15 under par. I'm out there for my winning score, but go ahead, let me know what you guys are going to take, and let's go out there and have ourselves a week. Best of luck with your exposure, whether it's for DFS or on the betting side of things. And I'm looking forward to getting out there on the course. Just like last week, I'll be there for the Pro-Am. So if you want some of the information or the intel that I gather while I'm out there on the course, well, make sure to follow my Twitter/X. There will also be a link down below to that. And of course, in addition to that, my Patreon page to go out there and stay tuned with everything that I'm producing. But until then, guys, appreciate all the support here on the channel as per usual. And let's go out there and enjoy ourselves a little bit of that 5th major action.